Next on Currents News, Pope Francis's first full day on his pilgrimage of peace. Here is a message to Mozambique, a country still recovering from a brutal civil war. United States bishops are asking for prayers. Hurricane Dorian has arrived on the East Coast, and she's promising life-threatening storm surges for the Carolinas.
Religious men and women hit the streets of Brooklyn. They're on a mission to welcome people to the church and bring them closer to Christ. I'm Tim Harfman, and I'll have the story.
Plus, a teen speaks out from his hospital bed. He was vaping and then his lungs stopped working. The news starts right now.
Sois importantes.
Pope Francis telling young people in Mozambique to believe they are important. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. The Holy Father is making history in Africa. The biggest highlight so far, Francis speaking to thousands of teens, enough to fill a sports stadium. Melissa Butts wraps up the Pope's jam-packed day.
On his first full day in Mozambique, Pope Francis kicked off his morning with a visit to the country's leaders. His first words expressed his closeness to those who were affected by cyclones Idai and Kenneth. He's unable to visit them due to the length of the trip. Then he directed words of peace and reconciliation toward the country, who signed an agreement to end decades of hostility last month, ahead of national elections in October.
Também quero exprimir o reconhecimento meu e de grande parte da comunidade internacional pelo esforço que há decênios se vem fazendo para que a paz volte a ser norma e a reconciliação o melhor caminho para enfrentar as dificuldades e desafios que tendes como nação.
He reminded them peace must be sought after so neighbors can coexist, ensuring a future of hope. Secondly, Pope Francis met with young people from every religion represented in the country. He began by encouraging them.
Vos sois importantes. Precisais de o saber. Precisais de acreditar nisto.
Pope Francis advised them to hold on to their joy and be wary of resignation and anxiety, which can ruin a person's life. He encouraged the Muslims, Christians, and Hindus to dialogue altogether. His day concluded at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception with Catholic religious, who welcomed him with singing. The Pope asked them to renew their vocational yes, especially when faced with societal difficulties.
Somos chamados a encarar a realidade como ela é. Deste mundo, arrastra-te numa corrida sem sentido, sem orientação, nem objetivos claros, e deste modo se malogram muitos dos teus esforços.
Pope Francis invited them to seek out silence, especially in moments of intense service and exhaustion. He blessed the excited attendees before leaving in the Popemobile to conclude his first day in Mozambique. Melissa Butts, Currents News.
Traveling with the Holy Father throughout his visit to Africa is Crux Rome Bureau Chief Inez San Martin. She joins us now. Inez, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So one of the big moments today came when Francis called peace a delicate flower. He was speaking at the presidential palace. Mozambique has been torn by civil war and is still struggling with violence. What impact is the Pope likely to have on the conflicts?
I think that there's going to be a long-lasting impact, and the hope for this comes not from the event at the presidential palace, which was without a doubt historic, but because of what happened when he met with some 4,000 youth from different religious backgrounds, when he was greeted them there by them with people screaming reconciliation. That was a very powerful and impactful moment. And when you think about it, this is a generation, most of them, people who were born after the war, people who know what it is like to live in peace, and they're not going to want to risk it. And Pope Francis, in many ways today, gave them that little push that a lot of them were asking for and needed to keep going on that path of friendship, of building bridges and not walls.
The church is a key player in Mozambique's peace talks. How are Catholics bridging the challenges the country faces?
It's first of all, one of the ways they're doing it is actually through dialogue and interreligious dialogues. And what was very interesting today, actually, at the presidential palace, going back to that, we saw not only the president, but the leader of the opposition, who was there on the second row at the invitation of the president, who during his remarks called him my brother. And he acknowledged that there were times in which they didn't see eye to eye, in which they made mistakes. And a lot of them are hard to repair, but the country's working hard to guarantee that they don't go back.
Now, you've been on the ground with the Pope. Very quickly, how has the trip gone so far, and what's next on his schedule?
I would qualify it as very successful. Everything that was supposed to happen has happened. The Pope is not one to shy away from controversy or from being tough when he has to be tough, but I think he understood that right now is not the time to go screaming and finger pointing at people of Mozambique. I'm personally very much looking forward to what's going to happen on Sunday when he goes to Acamasoa, a very big, interesting, charitable effort by an Argentinian missionary priest by the name of Pedro Opeca, he's been credited globally for single-handedly taking 30,000 people out of poverty and helping some 500,000 have access to education, housing, and healthcare. So it's going to be very interesting to see that reunion, because the two, Bergoglio, Pope Francis and Opeca met each other in seminary.
Well, we look forward to your continued coverage. Inez San Martin, Crux Rome Bureau Chief, traveling with the Pope in Africa. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All along the Holy Father's mission, Currents News will have special coverage you won't be able to see anywhere else. Inez will be at the Pope's side during the three-nation visit and will have exclusive reports from Africa. And there's even more on this program. Don Rogers is moments away. He's a top official with Catholic Relief Services, and we'll talk about the Catholic explosion he's seeing firsthand on the continent. That's still ahead in this newscast. Turning now to the big story in our country that's still breaking tonight. Hurricane Dorian is finally making landfall. Karen Kefa reports the latest on the dangers facing the Carolinas.
This downed power line in the streets of Charleston showing multiple hazards Dorian presents to the Carolinas right now. The wind taking down trees and power lines, the heavy rain flooding low-lying areas.
Largely, everyone has heeded the warning to stay off of the roadways. We still have dangerous conditions present.
Dorian even spawning tornadoes. In Little River, just north of Myrtle Beach, residents were startled awake by a loud noise.
We just heard the loud rumbling noise. Kind of sounds like a train.
In North Carolina, the National Weather Service shared this image of a possible tornado near Wilmington. And in Emerald Isle, Byron Cox and his father Simon also rode out a tornado.
I've never seen anything like this in my entire life.
North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper said he's activated more of the state's National Guard soldiers and urged residents to stay alert.
Get to safety and stay there. Don't let your guard down.
In South Carolina, flooding remains a chief concern. This video taken in Charleston shows high water moving quickly in the streets. Dozens of roads in the city are closed. This business owner is hoping for the best on the other side of the storm.
Fortunately, we'll be back open this weekend. The sun will be out. Those poor people in the Bahamas, have years to regroup. But, we'll be all good in a couple of days.
Karen Kefa, Currents News.
The storm news from the Bahamas is getting worse tonight. One resident is saying the only way to get through the disaster is to have faith in God. Video from the sky over Abaco Island is showing the extent of the devastation. At least 20 deaths have been confirmed, but the number is likely to go higher. About 70% of homes in the Bahamas are underwater, and a huge humanitarian crisis is taking shape. Dorian slammed into the islands with wind gusts over 200 miles an hour. The bishops of the United States are mobilizing to help out the island nation. They're urging Catholics to make donations for emergency aid and relief. The bishops are pointing out two sites that are accepting contributions: Catholic Relief Services at crs.org and Catholic Charities at catholiccharitiesusa.org. There are links to donate on each homepage. The climate is a hot topic among the Democrats who want to be president, highlighted all the more during hurricane season. During a town hall, candidate Pete Budaj told the audience what he thinks God thinks about the environment.
If you believe that God is watching as poison is being belched into the air of creation, and people are being harmed by it. Countries are at risk of vanishing in low-lying areas. What do you suppose God thinks of that? I bet he thinks it's messed up.
Budaj, in a different television appearance, accused the Republican Party of being out of sync with Christian values. Tonight, religious brothers and sisters from Maryland are on a mission in New York City. They're out on the streets of the Brooklyn Diocese talking to people face to face, trying to convince them to give church a chance. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports.
On the streets of Brooklyn, religious men and women have one goal: bringing people closer to Christ.
It's been a few days, but we see fruits.
They're part of the Order, the Institute of the Incarnate Word. Nearly 40 brothers and sisters traveled from Maryland to serve the Brooklyn Diocese for 2 weeks, knocking on doors and walking the city streets to invite people to church.
What we want to do is share, like Pope Francis said, the joy of the gospel. So on the street, to show a smile, even just listening.
The Curbside Catholics also handing out flyers with events at St. Teresa of Avila Church and the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph.
What I tell them sometimes when they kind of like feel like, you know, we don't come here to condemn you, we don't come here to judge you, you know, we come here to tell you that the doors of the church are always open for you.
Brother Simone Magana is one of the missionaries meeting residents face to face. Today he meets Marie Kelly. Walking her dog Mimi, she admits she turned away from the church in college.
The Catholic dogma kind of got to me a lot, and I know there's been a lot of changes and a lot of improvement. The message at the time from the Catholic Church just wasn't resonating with me.
She's finding Christ again, thanks in part to her interaction with these brothers.
Now that I know that I feel like I need some more spirituality and God in my life, I think that, you know, at least going back to what I was raised with might help me start on the right path.
Marie's story reminds Brother Simon of another interaction he had a few days ago. One woman saw him as a godsend.
She's all like, every time somehow I need it or I'm going kind of like astray, somehow God sends a sign or someone or something, and this time it was you.
A sign to reinvigorate the pews of the borough of churches.
St. Teresa's around the corner from my apartment, so that makes it really easy. Yeah. We walk by it at least 3 times a day.
Marie says come Sunday, she might just stop in, and that would fulfill the goal of the missionaries from Maryland. In Crown Heights, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Tonight, police are asking for help to catch a burglar who has broken into several churches in Brooklyn and Queens. The cops are after this man, calling him the suspect in a crime spree that started a month ago. Allegedly, he has hit a half a dozen churches, recently stealing $1,000 from the collection boxes at St. Sylvester's Church in New Lots, Brooklyn. He's also wanted for burglarizing stores and schools. Altogether, nearly $5,000 in loot has been taken. The NYPD is asking for the public's help in identifying the man. Anyone with information should contact Crime Stoppers at 800-577-TIPS. Coming up next, an exclusive report on Currents News.
We're having so much fun here at Our Lady of Grace Catholic Academy. I'm Emily Derby, and coming up, I'll tell you about a program they're implementing this year, and it's all about kindness.
New action tonight to keep kids away from e-cigs. We'll tell you what one state is doing about the flavored ones. And a teenager in the hospital is talking about what happened to him. His lungs stopped working after vaping. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. It's a party at Our Lady of Grace Catholic Academy for the first week of school. The NYPD police band putting on a concert that had all the kids on their feet. Also getting a standing ovation, the new students. Though it's normal for newcomers to feel out of sorts during the first days of school, that's not the case here in Gravesend. The school has a simple but special way of welcoming students, and Currents News' Emily Druby tells us it's increasing their enrollment every year.
Turn to your right and say hello.
Students at Our Lady of Grace Catholic Academy starting the school day by simply saying hello.
Good morning.
To their fellow classmates, teachers, parents, and the NYPD police band putting on a concert to kick off the school year. Principal Kelly Wolf says this year they're focusing on the greeting as a way to spread kindness.
You turn to your left and you say hello to a friend. You turn to your right and you say hello to a friend. And hopefully then throughout the day, it just turns into a conversation. And by the end of the day, it becomes a friendship.
The exercise comes from a national movement called Start With Hello, which seeks to create a culture of inclusion at schools. It was started by family members of those killed during the Newtown, Connecticut mass shooting.
Anything we can do to help the kids feel welcomed and to feel like they belong.
Teachers hope if students just say hello to each other, it will make everyone more comfortable, especially the school's 20 new students.
People have been treating me really nicely. There's a lot of people, friendly people, and they're nice, and the teachers are awesome.
And it seems to be working.
It warms my heart because there are so many new students and it would make them feel welcome, and it's easier to make friends that way.
The school's population has steadily increased over the past 3 years. Principal Wolf credits the positive and welcoming community they've built within the school and neighborhood.
When they come here at Our Lady of Grace Catholic Academy, they're joining a family. I'm opening my doors and welcoming them into my family.
The initiative comes naturally to Our Lady of Grace. Each day, students learn basic Catholic values that focus on loving your neighbor as yourself.
We're supposed to be more like Jesus. And so starting your day with hello to so many new faces that are there, it's just, I think, what Jesus would want us to do.
It's a small but powerful action that the Academy hopes goes a very long way. In Gravesend, Emily Druby, Currents News. Michigan is now the first state in the U.S. to ban flavored e-cigarettes. The governor there says the action is meant to protect young people from the potentially harmful effects of vaping. The ban, which covers retail and online sales, goes into effect immediately. Michigan is just one of the many states where health officials are currently investigating serious lung problems that may be linked to e-cigarettes. Across the country, schools are cracking down on vaping as well. From locking bathrooms to installing vape sensors and doing random nicotine tests. But the measures are coming too late for one teen from Illinois. He's speaking from his hospital bed tonight. He's hooked up to machines, his lungs partially functioning. Liz Nagy has the story.
That sound is keeping Adam Hergenrieder alive.
My lungs feel like they're being crushed by 20 pounds.
They're only inflating with the help of this machine. He hasn't left this hospital bed since Saturday, and he almost didn't make it here.
They told me if we didn't bring him in when we brought him in, his lungs would have collapsed and he would have died.
2 hospitals and several doctors later, a pulmonologist pulled up an x-ray on Adam's lungs. They were only partially functioning.
I'm 18 years old. My lungs are like a 70-year-old's.
Adam Hergenrieder spent the last year and a half hitting a jewel pen. He says about 1.5 of them a day.
When I first started juuling, I didn't know what nicotine was. So I just thought it was just a vape juice, or I don't even know what vape juice is.
Then he added THC dabs. According to the Illinois Department of Public Health, Adam's now one of more than 24 people who've gotten sick from vaping. But the American Vaping Association says each day of this crisis brings more evidence that street vapes containing THC or other illegal drugs are responsible for these illnesses, not nicotine vaping products. Before he's even out of the hospital bed, Adam and his parents are waging war on vaping.
It almost killed my son, and I'm not going to be silent.
Liz Nagy filing that report. Adam's doctors say he can't leave the hospital until he can breathe without machines. Even then, it will likely take months for his lungs to fully recover. Stay with us for more special coverage of the Pope in Africa. As Francis continues his groundbreaking mission, a top expert is up next to talk about the explosion in the number of Catholics living on the African continent. It's an exciting story. And the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/OurDiocesanFamily. Your pictures may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. Returning now to our top story, the Holy Father's week-long journey to Africa. Francis's trip is likely to have a huge impact on the three countries. To give us a bigger picture of the Church's current role in Africa is the Global Church Engagement Advisor for Catholic Relief Services, Don Rogers. He joins us now. Don, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Don, we know Africa has a rapidly growing Christian population. According to the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, the number of Catholics on the continent is currently 235 million. That's way up from 45.5 million back in 1975. Can you explain this rapid growth to us, and what does the visit mean to all those believers?
Well, I think that the growth is explained by the very strong religious nature of the African people and their concern for the issues of ethics and the care of creation and the spiritual life. And the churches in Africa are very active, and they're very responsive to the needs of the people. And so I think that many Africans are attracted to the dynamism they see among the African church members.
So much of that growth has to do with connecting with young people. Catholic Relief Services works hard across the continent of Africa to invest in youth. What initiatives do you take there to ensure a brighter future?
Based on a project that has been very successful in Central America, we have been implementing youth build throughout other parts of the world, including in East Africa. In these areas, entrepreneurship, education, and employment are key elements of the future that the youth in Africa expect and hopefully will have.
Local Catholic churches are also working from the ground up to strengthen education across the continent. Tell us more about that.
The African Church is a leader in education, both at the university, the high school, and the elementary school level. The thousands of students that are educated find themselves in a society in which education is increasingly demanded for employment and for livelihoods. And so it's a key element of the programming that we are involved in.
Don Rogers, Global Church Engagement Advisor for Catholic Relief Services. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Remember to stay with Currents News for the latest news about the Pope in Africa. It's coverage you won't find anywhere else. The Holy Father is finishing up in Mozambique and still has 2 more nations to visit. He's on a pilgrimage of peace, and you'll see it all right here. That's Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.